Welcome the chosen ones. When a lion eventually roars, it does not apologize for the times it purred in order to live. You may want to sit down for this one, since what you're about to learn will either justify your growth or reveal all you've let pass in the name of peace. Here's the terrible truth. People were not surprised by your progress. They were surprised that you finally enforced the terms and conditions that came with it. They joined up for the former version of you, which was extremely accessible, spiritually giving, and emotionally discounted. But then something occurred. You recovered. You broke out of the trance. And sweetie, you didn't simply establish limits. You set up a full-blown spiritual barrier using divine face recognition. And now you have people wandering around saying, wait, who's the same soul, new access code? And no, you're not resetting it. What they referred to as attitude is essentially your high-definition aura. What they referred to as doing too much is now doing what you should have done years ago, preserving your peace as if it was national treasure. They're gasping as if you've done a crime just by refusing to let them steal you emotionally with a grin. If only they knew. This isn't even your final form, so buckle in. It's not simply about limits. This is about you being the version of yourself that they said you'd never have the confidence to be. Let's chat about why your metamorphosis has shocked folks. Nervous, vulnerable, and oddly hooked. Because, frankly, you are behaving differently. You finally stopped behaving as if you had no idea who you were. Number one, you became the access judge, and they are unable to cope with rejection from the court over which they previously presided. You used to be the one waiting outside the gates, hoping that someone would allow you into their lives, love, and respect. But somewhere along the way, something in you cracked. Not the kind of snap that breaks you, but the sort that strengthens you. You did not merely grow. You upgraded. And now you don't knock on doors anymore. You're the damn gate. That's what's bothering folks the most. You used to want their favor like air. You'd shrink, lower your glow, and make yourself more digestible in order to feel noticed. And they were content with that version of you. The one they could get on demand. The person who didn't realize how strong they were. But now you get to select who has access, who comes near, and who is blocked off. They cannot manage your new role. Why? Because it reveals something they never wanted to confess. They were only effective in your life when you lacked limits. They only had control because you kept giving them the keys. But once you knew you were the treasure, the basis, the gift, they couldn't replicate it. You changed the power dynamic forever. You become the judge, and not only others, but also yourself. You began discriminating your energy, preserving your tranquility, and calling out the games before they began. That self-awareness is harmful to others who benefited from your uncertainty. They aren't only surprised by your remoteness. They're outraged that they no longer have a front row seat in your life just because they formerly did. You removed their entitlement. You made them work for what they previously took for granted. And for those who are accustomed to you issuing full access permits, they are now standing outside, gazing at the velvet rope you placed, trying to figure out how they were demoted. What they don't comprehend is that they weren't demoted. They remain the same. You are the one who developed. You are not bitter. You are merely no longer blind. And now that you understand clearly, you aren't rushing to be accepted. You're standing motionless, waiting to see who is bold enough to approach you with respect or not. Second, what you know now is really powerful. It seems like a spiritual exorcism. Your no used to be gentle, hesitant, and filled with remorse. You'd say it with an apology, try not to offend, concerned that someone might leave or that you'd be seen as tough. But that version of yourself is long gone. Now, saying no does more than simply shut a door. It causes the whole room to quake. It does not sound like rejection. It sounds like a barrier supported by heavenly clarity. It is no longer simply a term. It's a whole energy change. People feel it in their chest because they realize they've been cut off from something genuine, something they used to feed on, control, or rely on without giving anything back. This is why your new no hits are different. It is not mean. It is not better. It is clean. It emanates from a place of inner serenity, not emotional turmoil. You are not reacting. You have made up your mind. That calm strength makes people uneasy. They're not accustomed to you guarding your energy in this manner. They used to expect you to bend to overextend, to say yes even if it depleted you completely in order to preserve the peace. But you finally realize the cost. You understand that peace without borders is not peace. It is a performance. And you aren't performing anymore. Saying no today accomplishes more than just prevent someone from crossing a boundary. It pushes them to see their own entitlement, guilt, and reliance on you saying yes. That is why they get protective. That's why they seem astonished. Your new no represents spiritual truth. Dressed up as a phrase, it reveals everything they never wanted to see about themselves. You're not outspoken about it. You do not explain it. You do not soften it to make it more pleasant. It simply is. People who earlier thrived on your uncertainty are now puzzled in your presence because they cannot manipulate clarity. They are unable to twist a definite border. They can't dance around a rejection that doesn't leave gaps to crawl through. What was once a weakness in you is now a weapon, not to injure, but to guard, not to punish, but to keep negative energies from draining your light. That's what you say nowadays. It is not rejection. It is self-respect. Speaking fluently, they finally comprehend. They can't interpret it any longer. Number 3, you did not just heal. You enhanced your soul's firewall. You did not merely heal. You upgraded. Not in a nice Instagram quote sort of way. You went through the dark, lonely, and raw portions of yourself, rewiring your whole internal system. You stopped responding to past stimuli in the same manner you used to. You stopped granting access to those who only showed up when they needed something. And you didn't simply establish limits. You've installed filters. Your spirit now has a complete firewall around it. People can't simply come back into your life and continue where they left off. They are struck by your energetic security system. You can sense their motivations, their energy shift, and the settlement rejection before they ever speak. You were spiritually encrypted, which perplexes those who used to know how to press your buttons. They'll claim you're different, that you're distant and chilly. But the fact is that you are elderly. Openness came from survival, from the need to be loved. I need to belong. I need to feel protected. You have outgrown that. Now you're not attempting to be understood by everyone. You are ensuring that you are not misinterpreted by yourself. And this internal clarity shields you from outward confusion. People use their usual techniques of guilt trips, subtle aggressiveness, and false compassion, but they go nowhere. No response, no energy. Just quiet in a door they can no longer open. And it annoys them since your system no longer responds to manipulation. It rejects it immediately. This is not simply about personal improvement. This is spiritual development. You are no longer operating from trauma. You are working from the truth. You're not motivated by fear. You are led by discernment. As a result, not everyone has the opportunity to sit with you. Not everyone has access to your universe. They frequently discover too late that they were only let into your life because you hadn't improved your protection yet. Now you have. It is not that you are cautious. You're wise. You don't despise people. You simply know what they are carrying. You know what you're carrying. And you're not going to jeopardize your life to show your worth. Your firewall is not for show. It's about survival. It's an alignment. And only the true ones can make it through today. Number 4. You become a mirror, reflecting people's manipulative rot. You did not lose anybody because you changed. You lost them because your progress made them visible. You turned into a mirror, clear, unvarnished, and uncompromising. And let's be honest, most people aren't ready to face themselves in that light, particularly if they've formed whole identities around avoiding responsibility. Your presence began to make others uneasy, not because you were loud, theatrical, or demanding, but because you were genuine. You did not sugarcoat. You did not over-explain. You just stood for your truth. And that fact brought to light the portions of themselves that they did not want to confront. Your essay highlighted their turmoil. Your self-respect made their deception clear. Your limits exposed their emotional laziness. When you stopped rescuing, enabling, or going above and above for them, they began to drift away. Not because you done anything wrong, but because you disrupted their routine. You stopped playing the character they had written for you. The fixer, the forgiving scapegoat, the contingency plan. When you walked away from that position, they were left alone with themselves. And the stillness in that place was louder than the debate. People call you too sensitive, too much, or too cold. But the fact is that your clarity terrifies them. Because when you say no, you are not just establishing a barrier. You are demonstrating their dependence on you. Yes, you're revealing the emotional shortcuts they've used throughout their lives. You haven't merely changed. You got contemplative. Not everyone wants to be mirrored. Most people want to be confirmed, even if it means being in delusions. But you're not playing that game anymore. You're not here to boost egos or safeguard phony identities. And let's be honest, many of them understood exactly what they were doing. They just didn't expect you to wake up. They counted on your silence, guilt, and dread. However, now that you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. They can't reverse the exposure your energy creates when you enter into a room. You are not the villain. You are the mirror. And they're not fleeing from you. They're fleeing from what they see when they stand next to you. Number 5, you're provoking others by refusing to bleed for their comfort. You did not become tough. You simply quit using your misery as a cushion for other people's dysfunction. For so long, you were the one who kept things together. You made allowances for folks who had never grown up. You muted the light so they didn't feel little. You bit your tongue so that others don't have to deal with the unpleasantness of their own actions. And it exhausted you. But now that you've stopped bleeding, others may feel entire. You've had enough of sacrificing your mental serenity so that others might avoid dealing with their own problems. You've quit being the emotional sponge, soaking up everyone else's issues while your own are disregarded. You recognize that being selfless without bounds is not inherently admirable. Abandonment. People are upset now that you've regained your space, not because you've become rude or arrogant, but because you're no longer accessible for use. You don't flinch when someone attempts to guilt-trip you. You don't rush to mend something you didn't break. You don't decrease your standards to keep the phony peace going. And the disturbance, the reluctance to fold, sets them off. They're used to you acting tiny so they can feel huge. They're used to your quiet, tolerance, and commitment. Even if it means sacrificing your own well-being. You've pulled back, stood up, and said, enough. They feel vulnerable. Your distancing highlights the ways in which they have avoided growing up. Your restrictions make their explanations seem weak. Your power causes people to confront the flaws in themselves that they have long disregarded. You aren't asking too much. You're no longer willing to settle for less. That is the difference. People who only adore the version of you, who tolerates everything, will struggle to deal with a version of you that demands respect. You're no longer in their circus. You walked away from the clowns, packed your emotional stage, and carried your light with you. And now all that remains is their own cacophony reverberating in the place where your stillness once made way for their trash. They're not upset with your change. They're upset because they can't take advantage of your self-indulgence anymore. Number 6, your vibe shifted from please like me to you better come. Correct? You used to carry that energy. The type that silently asked, please like me, not out of desperation, but because you were still unlearning the concept that love had to be earned by offering, explaining, or overextending oneself. So you've made yourself extremely accessible. You were tolerant of flaky individuals. You defended poor conduct. You offered opportunity after chance, hoping that someone would eventually notice your heart and not tread on it. But something inside you flipped. Maybe it was a betrayal. Perhaps it was burnout. Perhaps it was just the last time you sobbed over being regarded like an option. Whatever it was, it triggered the part of you that recognized that your value was never meant to be negotiated. And suddenly your whole energy has transformed. You are no longer out here seeking to be loved. You are not bending to be palatable. You're not reducing your tone to seem less strong, or decreasing your presence to prevent being identified as the previous version of yourself, the one with the open window gone. What remains today is a castle still full of love. Yes, but protected, guarded, and watchful. People can sense it. The same people who used to give you attention. I am now feeling blocked. They used to guilt-trip you with silent therapies. Now restore quiet. Ghosting gets no response. It receives a permanent exit. They can't trick you with passive aggressiveness, spiritual manipulation, or phony sensitivity anymore. You don't consider possibilities. You measure consistency. You do not decipher mixed signals. You erase them. You do not pursue, plead, or beg. You observe. If the energy does not match, you leave that shift in you. It is not arrogance. It's an alignment. You are no longer expecting that someone would eventually treat you properly. You're ensuring that only those who already know have a place at your table. Your limits are no longer guidelines. They are requirements. You are no longer arguing your value. You're enforcing it, come right or don't come at all. Number 7, you're not acting fresh. You're finally behaving as if you deserve to exist completely. You are behaving spanking new. You're finally behaving like a person who understands their right to take up space. You are no longer going around as a watered-down version of yourself in order to make others comfortable. And the shift, it's got folks talking. They'll notice that you're behaving differently. That accomplishment transformed you, and that healing made you distant. But the fact is that you have finally removed the mask. You stopped pretending humility for those who mistook your quiet for weakness. You are not chilly. You are clear. Make it clear who you are, what you accept, and what you will not tolerate anymore. You used to carry other people's feelings as if they were your own. You used to be terrified of establishing limits because it might cause people to leave. But you've realized that if someone can't handle your totality, they were never intended to remain. They missed the version of you that was easily manipulated. It is easy to feel guilty. Simple to access. The person who said yes out of fear and endured mayhem from a traumatic experience. But that version of yourself died when you discovered your peace was irreversible. You did not develop to show off. You have adapted to survive. Your former self was taxing. Always adapting. Always explain. Always giving others the benefit of the doubt while depleting yourself. You no longer want closure. You do not beg to be understood. You know who you are, and that's all. And let's be honest. Some individuals do not dislike the new you because you changed. They despise that you gained the courage to become someone they can no longer influence, drain, or define. You stopped entertaining spiritual squatters who never provided value but constantly demanded room. Your new frequency does not accept garbage masquerading as loyalty. You don't do emotional gymnastics merely to show you care. You are not available for confusion, half-effort, or disarray veiled in charm. You're done acting little in order to be digestible. You are not rude. You are real. Allow them to speak. Allow them to distort the tale. You don't owe someone tenderness at the cost of your soul. You finally behave as if you deserve to exist completely. That is what makes them so unpleasant. Number 8, they aren't accustomed to you making your own choices. They're accustomed to you prioritizing others before yourself. They were never ready for the occasion. Finally, you would select yourself. For so long, you made them your first priority, always showing up, adapting, and creating space, even when it ached or drained. You gave up your calm only to keep the relationship alive. You answered yes when you meant no. You remained when you were supposed to go. You let your truth rest in quiet so that others would not feel uncomfortable with your candor. But suddenly something clicked. You were not maintaining peace every time you abandoned yourself in order to preserve it. You were losing both yourself and others who benefited from that version of you. They never imagined the day when you would cease putting them first. That is what confuses them. Not because you are heartless, but because your heart has finally returned home to you. They aren't accustomed to watching you safeguard your energy. They aren't accustomed to hearing you say, "No, I can't do this," and mean it. They're not used to seeing you go away without turning back, justifying yourself, or collapsing afterwards. That strength or that clarity, it is unfamiliar to them. And it should be because you spent so long providing people with comfort that they did not deserve. You're now treating yourself with the same care that you've shown to others. And it's about time you stop being so bitter. You allowed it to fall because it was one-sided, broken, and unstable. You stopped being the one who always did the emotional work. You stopped being the glue, binding things together that were never intended to last. And now that you're standing on the healed, honest, and free side, you can finally breathe. This isn't retaliation. This is not vengeance. This is self-respect. You're not attempting to harm somebody. You're just unwilling to injure yourself anymore, for the purpose of being understood or accepted. You just quit lighting yourself on fire to make everyone else warm. You surprised them, not because you turned unkind, but because you finally understood. You selected yourself, and they're still trying to find out how to live in a world where they're no longer priority number 9. Your dissociation is a weapon for mass awakening. Your remoteness is not apathy. It's a revelation. It's not chilly. It is not bitterness. It's the effect of finally recognizing that your existence was being taken for granted. You used to over-explain, over-care, and over-give, assuming that if you only put enough of yourself into the issue, others would recognize your value. However, they didn't. Not because it wasn't there, but because they never expected to see it. So you've gone quiet. And the stillness says volumes. Not in a lyrical cliché sense, but in a surgical one. It cuts directly through the performance. When you fall back, there is no drama, no warning, no announcement, just true distance. The sort that has folks pacing in their own thoughts, wondering when the change occurred and why they can't reach you like they used to. You stop debating because you recognize that anybody who required your sorrow to grasp your argument had never really listened. You stopped explaining yourself to those who warped your reality for their own convenience. You've stopped leaning in. And in that retreat, you ignited something much more powerful than conflict ever could. Self-reflection. People are waking up not because you preached or battled, but because you left. You did not bang the door. You just gone from the emotional battlefield. And when you did, you carried the spiritual supply with you. They've drained the emotional juice from your empathy. They misused that access, claiming it was restricted due to proximity. Your detachment conveys the message. It's the final judgment. It claims you had me, but you mismanaged me. Now you may sit in quiet and think about it. Whether they confess it or not, they feel it. They sense your lack of vitality at every low point, every phony connection, and every empty discussion. And they attempt to replace you with, "You aren't being petty. You are being exact." Your quiet is not a pause. It is a full stop. It's a spiritual consequence wrapped up in self-control. And to every soul who mistook your gentleness for weakness, your detachment is now a mirror reflecting precisely what they lost. Number 10. You no longer allow anyone to use love to slip past your barriers. You have seen what phony love looks like up close. It appears clothed in kind words and pleasant embraces, but folds when it is required to be honest, present, or responsible. You've experienced the emotional tug-of-war in which someone claims to love you, but you're always the one doing all the emotional heavy lifting. That sort of love used to make you let down your guard, but not anymore. You are now full awake. You no longer confuse appeal with integrity or desire for peace. You've realized that true love does not cross borders. It respects them. It does not flinch when you seek for clarification. It does not punish you with silence if you hold it responsible. You've outgrown the kind of love that expects access but refuses to earn it. People used to get past your barriers by saying just the right things. They would say, "I love you," right after they mistreated you. "I care for you," even after they neglected your needs. But it no longer works for you. Because today, love without action is only noise. Affection without responsibility is manipulative. You eventually stopped conflating the two. You no longer lean in when others say they love you. You observe how people respond when you say no. You notice how people react when you express your uneasiness. You see what happens when they don't get their way. That's when their true self emerges. That's where the truth dwells. You are no longer impressed by extravagant gestures. You are moved by honesty. You do not care how much someone claims they love you. If their conduct disrupts your life, you realize that true love is not frightened of limits. It develops inside them. It honors them. If someone's affection crumbles the minute you ask for respect, it was not love. It was about control. And now for the wonderful part. You're not arguing about it anymore. You just disconnect. You have advanced to the next level. You're no longer defending your limits. You allowed them to speak for themselves. And if someone is unable to meet you there, they were never intended to be that close in the first place. A number. You no longer dread being misunderstood. You have too much respect for yourself to explain the obvious. Misunderstanding used to consume you from inside. You'd lose sleep trying to explain things, sending extensive texts, and having many chats simply to have someone understand you clearly. You felt that if you simply explained it correctly, they'd finally understand. However, some individuals have never sought to understand you. They just wanted to remain comfortable in the version of you that they could control, manipulate, or reject. You are no longer in pursuit of clarity. You don't hurt your back attempting to be seen accurately by others who profit from distorting your reality. You've understood that not everyone misjudged you by mistake. Some did it on purpose because the real you reveals their falsehoods, fears, and fabricated narratives. Your reality does not match their narrative, so they rewrite it and position you as the antagonist. And you used to freak out over it. You want to cleanse your name, defend your heart, prove your intentions. But now your new border is straightforward. Allow them to think what they want. Because when you choose your own tranquility above their acceptance, you stop playing defense in a game that was always rigged. You have quit educating willful ignorance. You've stopped explaining yourself to folks who already know what part you play in their tale. You're done offering comprehensive explanations to folks who merely listen to react rather than comprehend. That is not clarity. It is emotional effort with no reward. You now know who you are and have a serene knowledge. That is power. It is powerful because it is unaffected by rumor, confusion, or manipulation. It does not worry if someone misinterprets your silence or your decisions. It simply is. Allow them to run with their assumptions. Allow them to speak. Your life will continually disclose the truth, and those that are destined for you will recognize your honesty without the necessity for a presentation. You are not rude. You are not chilly. You've just finished stating the obvious to folks who are determined to misunderstand you. Also, there's that barrier. That is not pride. That's the protection number. You recognize that being overly polite was your most hazardous type of self-betrayal. You used to dress well as if it were your identity. Always open, forgiving, and understanding, even when others were blatantly taking advantage of you. You believed that being kind would protect you and improve how others treated you. Instead, it became the most harmful sort of self-betrayal. You were not being nice. You were self-sacrificing. You overlooked your own needs in order to make others feel comfortable. You devoted time, energy, love, money, and patience, all while quietly praying that someone would see the worth of your heart. Finally, pay back what you earned. However, they didn't. Not because they couldn't, but because they never needed to. Your niceness gave them license to steal without causing harm, without consequence, to disappoint you again, and without ever being held responsible. But something clicked. You understood that compassion without bounds is not love. It is abandonment. You were forsaking yourself to preserve imbalanced ties. And for what? To avoid confrontation. To avoid seeming mean. To be seen as excellent. That version of you was dying within, while everyone else benefited from your excess. You've retired from being the emotional life raft. You've let go of the urge to save others from their own mess. You no longer enter where you are not welcomed or make room for those who refuse to progress. Your compassion now includes conditions, responsibility, respect, and reciprocity, which does not make you heartless. It makes you wiser. You now realize that love does not imply enduring disrespect, and that forgiveness does not imply infinite opportunities. That compassion does not imply becoming a doormat. You betrayed yourself the most by being polite with no standards. Now you say no, without any guilt. You go away without explaining. You devote your efforts where it is deserved, not where it is expected. You are not less nice. You're just more discerning. That change is not bitterness. It is emotional maturity. You still love intensely, but now you also love yourself. You continue to contribute, but now you ensure that you are not the only one pouring. And anybody who accuses you of being selfish for guarding your peace has only ever been interested in the version of you who does not know how. A number. You become a border. And boundary is the new sacred term you use to absorb everything. Every feeling, every unsaid tension, and every subtle insult others try to pass off as a joke. You felt everything. You carried other people's pain as if it was your obligation to resolve it. You were the emotional sponge, taking up others' misery, bending oneself to fulfill everyone's wants while slowly bleeding out from the inside. You thought being strong meant never saying no. But it was survival, not strength. You've evolved into something completely else. You are no longer a sponge. You are a filter. You do not allow everything in. You do not accept every feeling, request, or excuse. You have transformed into a living, breathing border. And the folks who used to fill your space with their dysfunction are either stunned, outraged, or strangely silent. Not because you transformed overnight, but because you stopped accepting what did not belong to you in the first place. You are not bitter. You are clean. You've overcome your codependency. You eliminated the urge to be liked at your own cost. As a result, the majority of individuals fail to pass the new version of you. Not because you are unfair, but because they have never had to work for the privilege they were previously granted. You see things now. You notice emotional manipulation before it becomes comfy. You recognize projection the instant it strikes your soul, and you recall where you used to hold and absorb those things. You now reject them upon delivery. That is not rudeness. That is discernment. That is spiritual hygiene. And let's be honest, some people aren't angry because they lost you. They are furious because they have lost their dumping place. You used to be the spot where people dumped everything and then walked away, leaving you to carry the weight. But now you're finished. Being the emotional dump. Your place is sacred. No, your energy is curated. Your contribution is not part of a collective project. You don't let turmoil knock on your door and pretend it's love. Boundary represents your new language. And guess what? Those who are unable to communicate with you do not deserve to be with you. They are not afraid of losing you. They are afraid. They already did. They aren't terrified of losing you. They are frightened that deep down, they already have. Your metamorphosis is irreversible. I didn't simply catch them off guard. It proved what they had secretly hoped was not true. That you have finally seen everything. They smiled as they uttered the falsehoods. They engaged in emotional games while seeming to care. The bare minimum they provided while expecting the absolute most. You did not just wake up, you outgrew the whole performance. You are not the same person who used to stay by the phone hoping for a response, or who continued to give second, third, and fourth chances out of devotion to someone who never actually deserved the first. You are no longer in that emotional purgatory, praying for others to change, show up, or apologize. You're not hoping anymore. You're traveling with clarity, purpose, and no intention of turning back. That's what haunts them. Not that you changed, but that your shift was not fleeting, that it was not a fad, a fit of rage, or a theatrical response. It was evolution. And evolution never reverses. You are not busy right now. You're not taking the time to think. You are gone. Not in a loud, bitter manner. But in a sense, it's both definitive and quietly strong. They haunt your presence, looking for traces of the old you, the one they could charm, guilt, or manage. However, that version of you has died and will not be resurrected. You don't make room for individuals who never appreciated it. You do not explain your absence. You let your development be the limit. And this is the scariest part for them. You aren't angry. You are not even emotional. You're just unavailable. That quiet separation, that serene stillness, they understand what it implies. It implies you realized the reality, accepted it, and walked away with your self-esteem intact. And no matter what they do today, that bell will not stop ringing. They did not lose access to you just because they made a mistake. They lost access because they didn't expect you to understand you were the prize. But now you do. They're not wondering whether you've left. They're attempting to find out how long ago they lost you without realizing it. The reality is, this version of you did not arise overnight. It was forged with fire. Every betrayal, disappointment, each moment you were ignored, exploited, or silenced, built the groundwork for the boundary-pushing force you've become. You did not arrive here by chance. You have earned this clarity. You struggled for this thing. And now that you've tasted self-respect, you can't go back to the version of yourself that accepted emotional starvation in order to make others satisfied. They will claim you have changed. And they're correct. You've transformed into someone who refuses to surrender yourself in the pursuit of connection. Someone who no longer uses love as an excuse for rudeness. Someone who no longer teaches fundamental human decency to those who know better but prefer not to act accordingly. You don't need validation. You don't need applause. All you need is alignment. And you've finally discovered it. You are no longer affected by emotional theatrics or guilt-induced shrinking. You don't flinch when others move away since you've accepted isolation. You know, it's better to go alone in reality than to be surrounded by delusion. Your detachment is not cold. It is sacrosanct. It is the place where you keep your soul safe from spiritual squatters and habitual takers. This is what self-worth sounds like. It is silent. It cannot be negotiated. It does not beg, negotiate, or compromise. It just is. And you've gotten proficient at it. Allow them to speak. Allow them to mislabel you. Allow them to deal with the void they created since none of it affects you anymore. You've risen beyond their grasp, not out of ego, but out of need. You are no longer open for misinterpretation by folks who are determined to misunderstand you. You are no longer sacrificing your spirit to preserve something that was never holy in the first place. You became the border. You became the mirror. You became the result. Most importantly, you became the version of yourself that no one expected you to be. And they're no longer merely watching you develop. They are forced to dwell in the aftermath of what occurs when someone finally decides to be themselves and never look back. If this message resonated to your spirit and revealed the truth, you have been living in quiet. Do not depart until you have officially asserted your authority. I like this video. If you've ever had to go away to discover yourself, comment underneath with "I choose me." If you've finished bargaining your value, share this with someone who is stepping into their truth. Someone who needs to know they aren't insane. They're just changing. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and enable alerts. This isn't just content. It's soul fuel. Every video is intended to take you further into your mission and remind you of who you are. We don't do surface around here. We tell the honest truth, and we heal out loud. Welcome to the next level. Subscribe and keep climbing. God bless you.